Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're starting a brand new Let's Talk Lore series covering Ma Chao's rebellion. And this series will take us from the start of the said rebellion against Cao Cao in early 211, all the way to 215, when Ma Chao joins forces with Liu Bei. Now, setting the scenes to start our series here, we have to first talk about Ma Chao's father, Ma Teng, who in 208, after seeing Cao Cao's victory over the remnants of Yuan Shao's sons, and the capture of the Jin province from Liu Bao's heir, Liu Chong, decided to surrender his forces over to Cao Cao. As part of Ma Teng's surrender, Ma Teng will be named as the Minister of Guards and moved to the city of Ye to work in the imperial court with his entire family, as his two youngest sons, Ma Xiu and Ma Tie, were also named as lieutenants. The only person to stay behind in the Liang province would be Ma Teng's eldest son, Ma Chao, who is named as the vice general and awarded a second marquis title to continue to garrison in Ma Teng's former holdings. Therefore, when Cao Cao made plans for an invasion of the Hanzhong region, he did not think mobilizing his forces through the territory Ma Chao held was going to be a problem. And to prevent any misunderstandings, Zhongyao and Xiahou Yuan, who were leading the attack, also sent envoys to Ma Chao ahead of time, stating their intentions. But Ma Chao, for some reason, did not believe Cao Cao, as he became convinced that the true reason Zhongyao and Xiahou Yuan were on the march was to target the Xiliang Warlords and not Zhanglu in Hanzhong. Now, it is impossible for us today to understand exactly why Ma Chao would think this way, or perhaps the Xiliang Warlords simply used this as an excuse to break away from Cao Cao, who was still recovering from his defeat at Shibi. Fundamentally, despite Ma Teng's surrender to join the government, most of the Xiliang warlords were still mere bandits, each with their own following of horseback marauders that would prey on civilians to enrich themselves. So thinking that the government forces, represented by Cao Cao, would be targeting them also made plenty of sense. And from historical records, we know for certain that Cao Cao's intention was in fact Zhanglu in the Hanzhong region, as when this plan was being made, Gao Rou of the Hedong region had warned Cao Cao that marching through the Xiliang region will likely spark a reaction from the local warlords, and that their best approach is to actually pacify the Xiliang region first instead of targeting Hanzhong, since Hanzhong can easily be acquired diplomatically once they see us pacify the much more difficult Liang region. Unfortunately, Cao Cao would ignore his advice, and thus under the leadership of Ma Chao and Han Sui, numerous Western warlords joined together in a massive coalition, including the likes of Zhang Heng, Liang Xing, Yang Qiu, Hou Xuan, Cheng Yin, Li Kan, Ma Wan, and Cheng Yi. Together, they were collectively called the 10 Warlords of Xiliang, and they commanded a seasoned fighting force of around 100,000 strong, with control over the Anding and Hedong commanderies. But of course, not all warlords wanted to rebel against Cao Cao, as Liu Xiong, for example, turned down Ma Chao's invitation, only for Ma Chao to attack them and forcing them to flee to Cao Cao. Now, despite being collectively called the 10 Warlords of Xiliang, only 2 of these warlords, in Ma Chao and Han Sui, mattered, as they would represent the 2 largest factions within this coalition. So in order to convince Han Sui to commit to this rebellion, Ma Chao told Han Sui that after today, I will become your son, as our rebellion is akin to abandoning my father and your son, as Ma Chao's father and Han Sui's son were both serving in Cao Cao's court at this time. And despite pleas from his own general, Yan Xing, whose own parents were also hostages in Ye, Han Sui decided to join Ma Chao and the other Xiliang warlords in rebelling against Cao Cao. But when the news of the rebellion first arrived in Ye, Cao Cao did not immediately move against these hostages, as killing them would eliminate the chance of any peaceful resolution to the matter. Instead, Cao Cao first recalled Zhongyao and Xiahou Yuan's forces, as meeting the Xiliang warlords on the open field is just a bad idea to say the least. Then Cao Ren, who had just been retreated out of Jiangling after losing it to Zhou Yu, is now being sent to Tonggate to buy Cao Cao some time to mobilize a proper force for a western expedition. So from March to July in the year 211, Cao Ren held back the rebel forces at Tonggate, as the main weakness of Ma Chao's coalition was that they lacked any real siege capabilities. But the rebellion was still a costly one for Cao Cao, as tens of thousands of refugees flooded east as life under the warlords of Xiliang was brutal to say the least. Then in late July, after assigning his son Cao Pi to remain behind in Ye, Cao Cao personally led his main forces west and joined Cao Ren at Tonggate. Now you have to realize that the Tonggate was a natural choke point with the Yellow River to its north and Mount Hua to its south, but it was also a choke point in both directions. Therefore, as Cao Cao started to amass his force east of the Tonggate, Ma Chao and the Xiliang warlords responded in kind by amassing all their forces west of the Tonggate, as they knew that they also needed to hold this position to prevent Cao Cao's forces from breaking through into the Liang province. Yet, as the Xiliang forces swelled, Cao Cao became more and more confident as he celebrated the fact that all his enemies have now gathered here. Confused by his antics, Cao Cao's generals and advisors asked him why he was celebrating the enemy's growing numbers, to which Cao Cao replied, "First, the enemy forces are a loose coalition of warlords who do not serve one another. They all have a history of land disputes amongst themselves, so the more they gather in one place, the less efficient they become, as the command structure of their force breaks down due to having too many cooks in the kitchen. Second, I never planned to launch our western expedition from only the Tonggate. Instead, we will take a three-pronged approach with my main force, eventually taking a northern route, first across the Yellow River to the north, then sailing west once more across the Yellow River at Xihe, followed by a central force here at Tonggate by Cao Ren, before finally reinforced by a southern force that has been secretly moving from Van, looping all the way south away from the Hua mountain ranges into Lantian to target Chang'an directly from the south. So the more forces the enemy puts here at Tonggate, the less forces they have elsewhere. And lastly, with all of them here in one place, it will save us time from having to chase them all around one at a time. And thus, to pave the way for Cao Cao's eventual northern advances, Xu Huang and Zhu Ling were sent north to Puban in secret with 4,000 men, as they first ferried north across the Yellow River into Hedong, before waiting for Cao Cao's signal to take the western crossing at Pujing Gate in order to guarantee Cao Cao's safe passage westward in the future. At the same time, Ma Chao became aware of Cao Cao's potential intentions, as he warned Han Sui that their concentration of force at Tonggate opened them up to being flanked elsewhere should Cao Cao opt for a northern approach from Hedong, as Hedong would secure him a much safer supply route since most of Cao Cao's food supplies came from the north, and he suggested to personally garrison his forces on the northern banks of the Yellow River directly north of the Tonggate to prevent any potential crossings. And Ma Chao suggested that he could also spend some time in the area trying to cut off any resupply routes from the Hedong region, as it would cripple Cao Cao's food supplies and potentially force them back after a month if all goes correctly. Now, unfortunately, Han Sui disagreed with Ma Chao's assessment, as he believed that if their scouts could spot Cao Cao's main forces attempting such a crossing north, they would have enough time to ride to respond and strike their force mid-crossing from the south bank that they were on. Then in August of the same year, Ma Chao's warning came true, as Cao Cao's main forces was spotted ferrying north of the Yellow River. Immediately, Han Sui and Ma Chao's forces rode out to attack Cao Cao's forces there, while Ma Chao also sent Liang Xing and 5,000 men north to secure the Pujing gates, as that would clearly be Cao Cao's next target if they failed to stop Cao Cao's northern crossing. And by the time Han Sui and Ma Chao's forces would arrive on scene, they were too late, as the majority of Cao Cao's forces had already finished the crossing, but Cao Cao and his personal guards were actually still on the south bank with some of the remaining supplies, as they were acting as the rear guard. And able to quickly identify Cao Cao as someone important due to the fact that he was seated in a chair, Ma Chao quickly ordered his men to fire at that position. And all of a sudden, you had 10,000 horseback archers raining arrow down on Cao Cao's position, and he had only 100 tiger guards next to him. And this situation became extremely dangerous for Cao Cao, as many of his tiger guards fell down trying to protect him, but to no avail. Xu Chu would come and save the day, as he was the captain of these tiger guards, and he would snatch Cao Cao up and run to a ferry, as he was holding a horse's saddle in one hand to act as a shield to block arrows, while holding on to the war in the other hand as he steered the boat across the Yellow River. At the same time, to help buy Xu Chu and Cao Cao some time, Cao Cao's lieutenant, Ding Fei, opened up all the livestock pens and released the horses, cows, and sheep that had remained on the south bank to create this confusion to distract Ma Chao's horsemen, as they soon busied themselves with looting, despite commands from Ma Chao, as the lack of discipline among the nomadic riders would help Cao Cao once again, in a very similar fashion to how Wen Chou was killed at Yanjing many years back. And before we continue, we need to talk about Ding Fei, as he's a rather interesting individual who we'll probably never have another chance to talk about. Ding Fei first joined Cao Cao in December of 189, when Cao Cao first returned home to Chenliu to try to become a warlord. And not only because Ding Fei was there for Cao Cao when he had nothing, but also because Ding Fei shares the same hometown as Cao Cao. Cao Cao trusted and tolerated him. And I say tolerated because Ding Fei was extremely greedy and corrupt, and would go on to break many laws. But every time someone would bring up his crimes to Cao Cao would simply pardon Ding Fei. And when Cao Cao secured the emperor in 196, Cao Cao would elevate Ding Fei to become the imperial palace guard captain, which was the same role that Cao Cao had served to Emperor Liu Hong as part of his 8 captains of the West Palace duties. Of course, in the campaign against Ma Chao, Ding Fei would go on to save Cao Cao's life here by releasing the livestocks. And speaking of livestock, later on, when Cao Cao was away campaigning against Sun Quan in 216, Mao Jie, who had always been known for his strictness, finally got his opportunity to charge Ding Fei in a crime, as Ding Fei was caught swapping out his own cows that were old, thin, or diseased for healthy ones from the government cow pens used for the Tuntian farms. But once again, when Cao Cao returned from his campaign, Ding Fei would be released from prison and put back to his role as the Imperial Palace Guard Captain, as though nothing had happened. And when asked directly by Mao Jie, Cao Cao would explain that he knew Ding Fei was corrupt and greedy, but Ding Fei is like the dog that you have that constantly create trouble by stealing the neighbor's food or breaking their stuff. But at the same time, you know he is your loyal dog who will help you catch the rats, and you never have the heart to actually punish him. And Ding Fei will eventually die of old age not long after, but his son, Ding Mi, would actually continue his dad's role of being a loyal dog to the Cao clan, as he would actually be nicknamed as one of the 3 dogs of Cao Shuang, and would play a part in Sima Yi's coup later on, so we'll eventually return to the Ding clan in the future. But for now, with Cao Cao safely north of the Yellow River, we're going to end our first episode here and come back next time, as Cao Cao still need to make one more crossing west before reaching the Liang province. So hopefully you all enjoy this episode, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!